I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining. Yet we are supposed to believe that
That's
you are
false.
the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. When people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe. I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. I don't have any confidence in you. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem, the one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
From the very first moments of that explosive hearing, Jasmine Crockett made it clear she wasn't going to hold back. Just watch Kash Patel's expression the moment she says it. Looking him directly in the eye, she called him the least qualified FBI director in American history. Her point was unmistakable. Patel had never spent a single day serving inside the FBI. No badge, no investigative experience, no field assignments, no casework, nothing. Yet Donald Trump put him in charge of the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world. While career FBI agents must survive rigorous background investigations, psychological screenings, polygraph exams, and years of demanding training, Patel bypassed every one of those requirements for one reason alone: unwavering loyalty.
I am living the American dream. And anyone that thinks the American dream is dead, just look right here. You're talking to a first-generation Indian kid who's about to lead the law enforcement community, the greatest nation on God's green earth. That can't happen anywhere else.
Crockett went on to warn that, in her view, the only people who truly feel secure in America today are white supremacists. Speaking as a black woman, she said she doesn't feel safe, and millions of Americans, she argued, share that same unsettling fear. Children are being shot, churches have become scenes of horrific violence, and under Patel's leadership, the FBI has remained disturbingly quiet. So what's really happening inside the Bureau? How much risk does the country actually face? What isn't the public being told? And what happens when the person entrusted with protecting the system is the very one raising questions about it? Stay with us, because Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett delivered a stunning statement that left the entire room in shock. Watch the explosive exchange where she said what no one else was willing to tell him directly. What happened next is something you won't want to miss.
Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you are already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe. I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues. And frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught.
Crockett argued that Patel had completely exposed the true nature of his leadership, and the picture she described was even more troubling than many expected. According to her, before he was ever officially confirmed, Patel was already targeting longtime FBI professionals, not because of misconduct, but because they weren't viewed as sufficiently loyal to Trump. She portrayed that as a clear example of weaponizing the Bureau, transforming it from an independent law enforcement agency into a tool for political retaliation. Senator Durbin pointed to whistleblower accounts alleging Patel played a direct role in those personnel actions during the transition period. Veteran agents who had spent decades building major investigations reportedly found themselves placed on removal lists. Even the FBI Agents Association, which had initially welcomed Patel's confirmation, ultimately filed a lawsuit to defend its own members. At the same time, families were allegedly living under death threats and constant fear, while agents were reassigned away from domestic extremism investigations and redirected toward immigration enforcement. Experienced professionals were pushed aside and replaced by loyalists, creating a staffing crisis that reports suggest could take more than a decade to repair. Crockett's message was clear. This wasn't leadership, it was sabotage. She then highlighted another detail that rarely receives attention. Patel's own chosen deputy, Dan Bongino, arrived with a similar lack of FBI experience. His background included serving as a Secret Service agent before becoming a podcaster and later a Fox News commentator. Together, two of the nation's most powerful law enforcement positions were held by men who, according to the criticism, had never managed a single FBI investigation between them. Journalist Mark Fisher, who profiled Patel for The New Yorker, summarized the issue during an appearance on NPR's Fresh Air. He argued that Patel earned the position because of his loyalty and his willingness to pursue Trump's perceived opponents, rather than because of traditional qualifications. Fisher described an FBI increasingly shaped by political confrontation instead of criminal investigation, something he suggested was unlike anything the Bureau had experienced before. So when Crockett said she had absolutely no confidence that this FBI could protect her colleagues, she wasn't presenting it as political theater. She framed it as a serious warning, and what she revealed next came with evidence to support her claims.
I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people. And even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody. And then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing, except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice, or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem. The one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
14 years. Let that number sink in. Patel told the Senate it would take 14 years for the FBI to reach full staffing again. This wasn't a minor setback. It was an acknowledgement that the nation's premier federal law enforcement agency could be operating with a severely understaffed workforce for years to come, even as experienced agents are reassigned from domestic terrorism investigations to focus on immigration enforcement instead. Reporting referenced in an MSNBC opinion piece supports that concern, noting that the Bureau's workforce has been reduced by roughly 6% under Patel's leadership, with the remaining agents redirected away from priorities such as gun crime investigations. So while Patel tells Congress that restoring full staffing could take more than a decade, Crockett argues the dangers facing the country are anything but hypothetical. Republican lawmakers who voted against Jim Jordan reportedly received anonymous threats targeting their wives, forcing some families to keep loaded firearms nearby for protection. According to Crockett, that's the real consequence of misplaced priorities. Then she turned to Patel's public celebration of a high-profile arrest. She didn't dispute that the suspect had been taken into custody. Instead, she argued that Patel posted about the arrest twice, got key details wrong both times, and claimed credit for an apprehension that his own agency hadn't actually carried out. According to her, the suspect's family turned him in only after he publicly confessed online. What happened next, she argued, made the situation even more alarming. The following day, domestic extremists targeted an HBCU, yet the FBI's response was, in her view, complete silence. There were no public alerts, no major press conference, and no visible reassurance for affected communities, leaving many Black Americans wondering why threats to their safety seem to receive so little attention. Up next, Patel finally responds, and you'll want to hear the defense he offers.
Well, I'll respond. Kash Patel, as I said when I introduced him, public defender, former prosecutor, top staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, Deputy Director of National Intelligence with the National Security Council, Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, and FBI Director. I think that's a pretty good resume for the guy who's now running the top law enforcement agency in our country, and we've seen all the stats that he's given to the committee on how much better they're doing at getting the bad guys than the previous guy was doing. With that, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I think you're witnessing some auditions, clickbait auditions for the Academy Award for my Democratic colleagues. We'll see how they fare as they're on MSNBC later on today. But do you care, before I launch into my line of questioning, to respond to Ms. Crockett from Texas on that very elaborate and theatric display?
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history. That are facts that you cannot dispute. But you can come at me all you want. I don't care.
Kash Patel didn't fall apart emotionally, but his defense collapsed when it came to substance. After Jasmine Crockett spent her time challenging his leadership with detailed claims and documented examples, the committee chairman stepped in and began reading Patel's resume aloud, almost as if he were an attorney speaking on behalf of a client who couldn't defend himself. That moment alone spoke volumes. When Patel finally responded, he declared, "I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission." He then recited statistics about child predators, drug enforcement, and murder rates before ending with the now widely discussed line, "that are facts that you cannot dispute." While insisting his numbers were unquestionable, the FBI director made a noticeable grammatical mistake on national television. More importantly, his response failed to address the central issues Crockett had raised. He never explained the projected 14-year staffing crisis. He offered no answer for why experienced agents were being reassigned away from domestic terrorism investigations. He didn't respond to concerns about death threats against lawmakers or the FBI's lack of a public response after the attack on an HBCU. Instead, he leaned on broad statistics and declared success. Crockett's critics saw that as leadership, but her supporters viewed it as deflection from someone unwilling to confront the Bureau's deeper problems. Look closely at what happened during that exchange. Crockett spent several minutes presenting specific allegations backed by sources, claims that career officials were targeted before Patel's confirmation, that members of Congress had received death threats, and that HBCUs faced attacks without a visible public response from the FBI. Patel's reply focused largely on general performance numbers, while the committee chairman helped defend his qualifications. If his record fully answered those criticisms, supporters argue, he could have addressed them directly himself. Even Patel's frequently cited statistics have faced scrutiny. During an MSNBC MS Now segment, correspondent Ken Delanian and former FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge Michael Feinberg examined several of Patel's commonly repeated figures and questioned their accuracy. Feinberg argued that the FBI had expanded the categories used in its reporting, allowing the Bureau to receive credit for arrests that were primarily carried out by state and local law enforcement agencies. Another point often overlooked is that murder is generally prosecuted under state law rather than federal law. Because of that, the FBI has only limited direct influence over the national murder rate. Critics therefore argue that when Patel claims responsibility for historically low murder numbers, he is taking credit for outcomes largely driven by other agencies. Patel's own social media posts also drew criticism. After sharing a homicide chart with the caption, "Leadership Matters," many users noted that the data did not specifically reflect his time as FBI director. Those criticisms went unanswered. According to his critics, the concerns extend far beyond a single congressional hearing. Since Patel assumed leadership, the FBI has reportedly experienced one of the most significant political shakeups in its modern history. Numerous experienced agents and supervisors who had worked on sensitive Trump-related investigations were either dismissed or pressured to leave. Former acting director Brian Driscoll and other senior officials later filed a federal lawsuit alleging illegal political retaliation. They claimed Patel told them his own position depended on removing personnel who had participated in investigations involving the president. Reporting from the New York Times and other sources has also indicated that more than 20% of the FBI's workforce has been reassigned to immigration enforcement, shifting agents and analysts away from counterterrorism, counterintelligence, cybercrime, and violent crime investigations. At the same time, hundreds of national security professionals have departed the Bureau. Some were terminated, while others reportedly resigned because of what they described as a culture of fear, loyalty tests, polygraph examinations aimed at identifying leaks, and constant concern about becoming the next target of internal personnel actions. The result, critics argue, has been an unprecedented loss of institutional knowledge. Experienced counterterrorism and counterintelligence specialists have continued leaving at a time when the United States faces ongoing concerns involving Iran and persistent Chinese espionage efforts. One former senior official reportedly described the situation as institutional decapitation. Their argument is straightforward. When experienced professionals are replaced by political loyalists, or when remaining personnel become reluctant to handle sensitive investigations, the country's overall security is weakened. Patel has also faced criticism over his personal conduct. Multiple reports allege that government resources, including FBI aircraft and personnel, were used for trips connected to events involving his girlfriend. In another widely reported incident during the investigation into Charlie Kirk's assassination, while the suspect was still at large, Patel was reportedly dining at a Manhattan restaurant and posting inaccurate information on social media, claiming the suspect had already been captured. The criticism even reached conservative circles. Prominent conservative commentator Christopher Rufo publicly questioned Patel's leadership and called for his removal. Meanwhile, Patel's chosen deputy, Dan Bongino, a former Secret Service agent, podcaster, and television commentator with no FBI experience, also attracted attention because he had previously argued that the FBI was beyond repair and should be dismantled. Together, Patel and Bongino became the first director and deputy director in the Bureau's 117-year history to take those positions without prior FBI experience. Patel's performance during that hearing, confident, statistics-focused, and largely disconnected from the specific allegations Crockett presented, captured the heart of the broader debate. His critics argue that he prefers highlighting selective numbers while avoiding deeper questions about the institution itself. For them, the grammatical mistake wasn't the real issue. It symbolized a director they believe is overwhelmed by the job and more focused on defending his position than addressing the Bureau's underlying challenges. The debate, they argue, has moved beyond politics. It now centers on whether the FBI can continue fulfilling its mission of protecting Americans from serious threats. When experienced personnel continue leaving, resources are redirected toward political priorities, and the agency's leadership struggles to answer detailed questions about its performance. Critics contend that the greatest concern isn't coming from one political party or the other, it's coming from the very top of the organization. Drop a comment below and tell me the one word that best describes Kash Patel's performance during that hearing. Incompetent, dangerous, embarrassing, arrogant. I read every comment. If this video gave you a new perspective on what's happening inside the FBI, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest reports. We break down these stories week after week. What do you think happens next? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.